It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. To search it out is the glory of kings. This is the Message to Kings podcast.
Episode 356, John 15, Abiding. I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that does not produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so that they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want, and it will be granted. And when you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father. In this agrarian society, Jesus is the true grapevine. His followers are the branches. We're dependent upon the life supply and the connection to the true vine, right? There's so many teachable things from this. We had an apple tree in our yard for years. I studied on when and how to trim it. There's an art to it. It's crazy. Every winter, sometimes even in January, you're to cut it back. It's interesting because you don't bear fruit in the winter, but you trim it so that it buds in the spring, it grows, and then it bears fruit in the fall. The better you trim it, for growth, it produces more fruit. And you can parallel it to your lives really quick when you think about winter. When you're not bearing as much fruit, you're not outside as much, the days are shorter, you're resting more, you're reading more, you're taking more in, you're severing a lot of your outside connections just because of the weather, just because of the environment, so that you can start anew in the spring. There's a picture there. What if a branch isn't bearing fruit? You cut it. What if one of your relationships or connect groups or one of your activities or projects is not bearing fruit? You end it. It's very simple and practical. What if the entire tree is not bearing fruit? You cut it down and you plant a new one. But if you cut it down, if you trim it just right, there's a science to it that only God can do, that can trim that perfect apple tree to produce to generate and allow the most amount of sunlight to go in and around its branches and within it, the life bearing to produce the most amount of fruit. Only He can do that in your lives. And so we have to be led by the Spirit. And it's a simple analogy, and I've heard this taught before, is does a tree think about it? I'm about to bear a fruit. No, because it's so in line and so in lockstep and so in alignment with the way it was created, it naturally bears fruit. And that's what happens in the times and seasons when the right doors and the right timelines happen, that you're around those that you're supposed to influence and to change and to love and to bear Christ-like fruit. And that's when he says this about my disciples. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father. John 15:9. I have loved you, even as my Father has loved me. Remain in my love, And when you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will be overflow. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves, because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. This is my command. Love each other. So this abiding fruit is an overflow. It's a natural fruit that comes from a submitted life where we allow God to trim us, to mold us, to shape us, to abide in the true life of heaven, the life force of heaven that comes from him. And from that, he goes straight into love. And he speaks of remaining in his love. And the same principle holds true, because it's this abiding in the vine. By staying in the vine, we bear much fruit, but by staying in the vine, we remain in him and we remain in his love. Then he says, your joy will overflow. And then the commandment is to love one another and that we are friends. And it's something that he would speak of friends. I had a work assignment over 10 years ago in Australia. And once I had built relationships enough with some of my coworkers, some of the guys, they called me mate. And I didn't understand why they called me mate, but that actually meant that you're a respected friend. In Mexico, you're an amigo. If you're a trusted friend, there's different elements here. The language is often better outside of English or U.S. English per se, in that friendships are even better understood, that there's a trust factor there, and that the Father chose us and he appointed us to produce a lasting fruit. And then there's always, it's trickled in the book of John about whatever you ask for in my name, I'll give you. We always think about it selfishly, right? Well, if I want that Ferrari, or don't ask for the Ferrari because that's not what he meant. Like, what about the deliverance of a friend? What about a family member who just doesn't like God because he's been burned? What about that? What about the salvation of a coworker? Yeah, that's probably where our mind should be, right? Not on physical things, but on the souls of others. That God would use us in helping them through their struggles, showing them mercy and guidance and love, that because we abide, we are bearing fruit. And the fruit is his presence and his gifts and his love. And that's how the world sees around us. There's a whole other element of this teaching about being grafted in. And we'll see that later in the book of Romans, but being grafted in also applies to the vine. But the fruit principle truly is here, that if we allow ourselves to be pruned, to refined, and when I often look in my life, I find we go in the summer, especially in the fall, sometimes with school and college studies, work. And then by winter, some of those things that just didn't work out so well, whether it's relationships, projects, or teams we're a part of, those seem to always disappear. the ones that are not bearing fruit in the winter. And then come spring, you're like reactivated and revigorated in a different way. It seems to be a very common principle we seem to live by. But in that fruit season, fruit is growth. Fruit is fun. Trimming, not so fun. It often involves if you're holding on too tight to something, it hurts a bit. But we have to be obedient. Or you think about a branch on an apple tree. It's just not bearing fruit, and it grows a whole nother season, way out in the yard, still not bearing fruit, and this is just ugly branch that is no business coming out of that beautiful looking tree, and there's nothing coming off of it. It hurts a lot harder when you cut that branch the next year, because all this energy was put into a branch that bore no fruit. It should have been trimmed earlier. And often we make that mistake, that we hold on to something, whether it's a relationship or something we're working on or something we're doing, and it's just not bearing fruit. Some things have to be trimmed for the tree to work properly. And some things just have to die as well. Sometimes you got to cut a whole tree down to plant another one in its place. And that's the work of the Father. That's the work of the Spirit. But our job is to listen and to be humble and to not be prideful. Because imagine all the fruit. Remember that branch that should have been trimmed last year? It's sucking all the nutrients from the rest of the tree, and it's wearing out that tree. It's wearing you out because you're doing something you weren't supposed to be doing. It's not necessarily a sin thing, yet it is, but you're investing in the wrong things. You're spending the wrong time with the wrong people, the wrong crowd, or the wrong teams or projects. Let the Lord take care of those things that should have been taken care of in their time so that you can bear much fruit. It's a simple teaching, abiding in Christ. I spent more time on letting him trim you because that's probably where I've seen the biggest mistakes in my life, where we hung on too long. It was too complicated to get out. Whatever that means in your life, I pray you have the courage, you have the strength, and you have the diligence to walk in full commitment to God, bearing much fruit. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Message to Kings. Feel free to check out the website, messagetokings.com, or if you want to chat, email us at messagetokings@gmail.com.